say to anyone. I started this issue because it was close to home. My first connection with animals was through fur bearers. I fell in love with a fur bearer, and I didn't see any distinction between my little fur bearer and another fur bearer traveling the forests, and I couldn't see my companion animal, this little, beautiful little creature, be gassed, clubbed, stepped on, and have her skin ripped off her back for somebody's earmuffs. So it was there at that level. It was personal. And people ought to know what the reality is, that it is ugly. If it weren't ugly, people wouldn't be aroused to change it. Slavery is ugly. The Holocaust was ugly. The attitude toward black Americans, prior to the civil rights movement was ugly. Jim Crow laws were ugly. The lynchings, ugly. That's the reality. And if you hide that, how would anybody know? It'll just continue. 10 to 15 years ago, the fur industry was hurting greatly because of these graphic pictures of the reality of the fur industry. People were made aware and this and that. But after a while, after sort of plateaued, and the fur industry started taking measures to introduce fur back into the mainstream. And what they did that very, very cleverly. First, they dyed it to make it look like a synthetic maybe. And what they did is they applied it into non-fur garments, like on the cuffs or on the hood, just as a trim. So you have all these big companies buying this thing that's fur, but it's touted as a trim, as if any other fabric, as if it was corduroy or something. And they made millions of these coats, and people were buying it. So now people didn't give it a second thought. I mean, they bought a parka, a nylon parka, but now it had this trim on it. So now you had a lot of people walking around inadvertently with dead animals as trim. The fur industry get fur-bearing animals to make their garments out of in two ways. One is through trapping. Certain animals cannot be raised in a cage. So there are those that, quote, need to be trapped in order to get their pelt. That's what a steel jaw leg hole trap looks like. Come on, get Satch out of here. That thing's so dangerous. Who knows it? Come on, Inky Jabba Joe. Goodbye, Mary. Satch, stop crying. Everybody get evicted right now. Come on.
Here.
Okay. You're out, bro. This is, they stake it to the ground so it doesn't move. They cover it up. They put it in areas where they know the animals travel. Very common trap. It's very cheap. And what happens is this. Okay. There are different kinds of traps. There's a conibear trap. It's a spring-loaded trap that snaps shut on the body, supposedly killing the animal instantly. It almost never happens. It works well in theory, in practical application it doesn't. What happens is the animal gets caught in the midsection, or on the face, or on the snout, or somewhere where they don't get killed immediately. It's neck breaking, and they writhe in pain, sometimes for a few hours, sometimes for days, until the trapper comes along and either decompresses the animal by squeezing on his chest with his feet or clubbing the animal to death. If we show this on the street in New York, they say we have a dangerous weapon. You have a dangerous weapon that could cause harm. But cats and dogs and other non-target animals are caught in it, and they die and they suffer just the same, and then they're discarded. It's part of the equation, it's the business equation. Yeah, you're going to lose some and you're going to catch some, and if anyone feels that this is such a horrible thing to have their dog or cat undergo, what about the fox, and the mink? They feel all the same things that a cat or dog does, except you don't feel the same way about them. You see, that's the only difference, The fur industry is a huge industry, and they have all these resources at their command, and what they do, and they do very well, is try to misinform the public as to what actually happens. And they call things inappropriately, like a ranch, ranch with illicit thoughts of like a happy ponderosa, nice place with free roaming animals. Not true. To be more accurate, they're torture camps. These animals are born into captivity, into these cages barely big enough to have the animal turn around. Sometimes these animals, like fox and a mink, their range in the wild is somewhere between 20 and 40 square kilometers a day. That's their range, and they're limited to these wire cages that are built on wooden or steel platforms, but with no obstruction of the bottom part of the wire, so as to have all the excrement and urine feces drop down below, so it'll be easy for cleaning. That means these animals with extremities, limbs that are used to travel in grassy areas, in dirt, in wooded areas, in forests, are now forced to stand with these same extremities on this wire. These fur-bearing animals, they produce a heavier coat as the winter gets colder. So in order to unnaturally facilitate this natural process, they leave them exposed to colder conditions than usual. Bad feed. The feed's comprised of their fellow fox or mink that's died prematurely or had their pelt removed, fed them back, in effect making these animals cannibals, which they're not in nature. And they're in such confinement that a lot of them break down psychologically, and they exhibit stereotypic behavior, walking, pacing back and forth. It's a symptom of psychological breakdown. They actually went nuts, and they go nuts. Thousands more animals die prematurely, a lot of times very sick, a lot of times infections. I mean, there is no veterinary care because it's not cost effective to give veterinary care to an animal that's going to be made into a coat. So these animals have to endure these horrid conditions for many, many months until they're big enough for the kill. There's a couple of methods used, okay? There's anal electrocution, where they prepare an animal with a electricity conductive jelly in the anus, and they ground him by chomping on a steel bit. And they insert this probe into the anus, and they turn the juice on, and they fry him from the inside out. Very painful, but very effective for the fur industry because it kills the animal without hurting the pelt, and that's their focus, is don't hurt the pelt. Another way is gassing. A lot of times very primitive methods of gassing, sometimes just hooked up to a carbon monoxide crate. carbon monoxide gassing doesn't really ensure, it's not a scientific way of killing an animal, so it's really very crude, and sometimes it just doesn't work. And the animal's just knocked out. And they wake up as they're being skinned. It's just unconscionable. And this is not isolated incidents. This is just standard operational procedure. It just happens a great deal that these animals wake up as they're being skinned. Born into captivity, died in captivity. You know, it's really cruel and crude, and there's no way around it. There's no clean way. The animal always suffers. The first time I actually saw it, the videos, I was beside myself. I was squirming in my seat. It was just so